Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about The Batman.
Mm-hmm.
The Batman. It's the latest in a long line of reboots and reimaginings and so on and so forth. First of all, though, we've been away for a couple of weeks.
Yes, I've been on holiday.
You've been in Spain, going around Malaga, Cordoba,
Granada.
See anything good? Well, you've already seen The Batman.
I've seen The Batman.
Anything else?
Well, no, because I didn't see films, but, I was
Right.
just visiting, museums and,
Yeah.
things like that. So, but it was wonderful.
Yeah, so you went to see The Batman because you were with an English friend.
I was with an English friend, and that was the only film. That and Uncharted. So those were the two films that were available with subtitles in Malaga.
Right, so yeah.
And so, that was basically our only option, was to see The Batman, which I was very much looking forward to. And I figured, if it's good, I'll be happy to see it again with Mike. And if it's not good, then we probably shouldn't cover it anyway. So,
Well, it's always going to be worth covering because Batman is one of the biggest franchises out there.
Absolutely.
And I was waiting to see it, so I didn't know that you were going to go to see it, and it's fine. But I was waiting because I thought it's obviously going to be a podcast film.
Yeah.
When the trailers were out, you were saying how good it looks.
I thought it looked fantastic.
Extremely moody, extremely noir, extremely dark. And I suppose the title, The Batman, it suggests this kind of fundamental reboot to the whole affair because he's always Batman, and this is the Batman, the definitive article.
I must say, I don't know what you feel, and you can explain to me later, but I think it deserves calling itself The Batman. It's my favourite of them all.
Going back to the 60s?
I mean, I've to be honest, I've loved almost all of them.
Yeah.
Right? I love the Adam West camp TV series. I remember, it used to empty the streets when it was on. Everybody went home to see The Batman. I loved the Tim Burton one with, Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton. Yeah, I loved, the one with the Penguin and the Catwoman that he did as well. I did not love the George Clooney or the Val Kilmer. And, I know that you're a fan of...
Well, Nolan's are important. And
they are important.
And they're ones I grew up with, but yeah.
Yeah, but I don't like them as much as I do the Burtons or these ones, actually.
We did 3 podcasts on them.
Yeah.
And we went through we had a real reevaluation of them. And there are lots of things to criticise.
Yes.
In those films, but I think there are lots of things to praise as well. And they introduced a new vision for what Batman would be. It's interesting, I think I said in those podcasts that in the 1980s, when Tim Burton came in, that was like the vision of what dark Batman was. And then you got to Christopher Nolan and you went, oh no, that's what darkness is. And this
is even darker.
Amping it up. I don't hate this film at all. I really liked a lot of it. But I do kind of think it's like, it feels like Batman is never going to be fun again.
Well, I know you said that.
We haven't had a fun one since the George Clooney one, which was not good, but it was colourful.
You see, I love this darkness. And I thought it was just, because it feels like a nightmare or a dream or, which has all this desire and sadness and longing and... you feel all of that in the film, and most of it is kind of conveyed visually. Yeah. Right, which is really beautiful.
It's visually extremely strong.
Yeah, I felt it really looked like, or it gave the effect of a comic book, in the sense that you'd see these images, but some elements would stand out in a way that they don't normally in film. So here, for example, if it rained, the rain was highlighted in a way that you'd expect from a comic book.
That's when I first felt it, was in that car chase scene. In fact, let's just quickly say what the kind of plot is before we can get into spoiler territory. So this is, like I say, a new Batman. In fact, this was supposed to be written and directed and starring Ben Affleck when he signed on to be Batman.
I'm so glad he didn't do it.
In the DCEU in 2013. But that kind of fell by the wayside. I'm not sure why. Anyway, Matt Reeves took it over as director and co-writer. Matt Reeves is behind the second and third Planet of the Apes films, which I really like the second one at least. Third one's a bit much. He did Cloverfield. I think that was the film that kind of brought him to prominence as a film director. So he's got a track record. And he kind of stripped away all of the DCEU stuff that this really feels standalone. So actors from the other DC films aren't appearing in this. This is a separate thing. Although, of course, it is still Warner Brothers. It's still their license and everything. Robert Pattinson plays the Batman this time, and it's not an origin story. No. He's been Batman for a couple of years. Jeffrey Wright is Officer Gordon, Detective Gordon. He's not the commissioner at this point. He meets Selina Kyle in this film, who's played by Zoe Kravitz, who
is fantastic.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the second Tim Burton one with Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman.
I love Michelle Pfeiffer.
So beautiful and sexy. I mean, okay, I was like 8 when I first saw it, so I wasn't thinking about her in those terms. But now, wow.
Yeah, she's wonderful in it.
And Zoe Kravitz has the feeling of that here.
Zoe Kravitz. I mean, it's hard to say she outdoes Michelle Pfeiffer because who can outdo Michelle Pfeiffer? But she is as great as Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah. Well, she's not as aggressively sexual as Michelle Pfeiffer was, but she really had that. She was coming onto Batman left, right, and centre. And here there is definitely an attraction between the two.
She's a star,
but she has sensuality.
I mean, if people, if this film doesn't make her a star, there's something wrong with the casting people, because she's so beautiful and she's so sexy. And she conveys every emotion that is required of her on top of that. And she does that physically and visually with, what seems minimal effort. It's almost all gestural, or an eye movement, or a little tear, right? Or her walk, right? I mean, she is absolutely great.
And the villain that they're facing, broadly speaking, in this film is the Riddler, who is one that we've not seen in cinemas since Jim Carrey did it.
Yes.
And this is a very different interpretation, and we'll get to, part of the question is, who is the Riddler, right? He's appearing in kind of videos hiding his identity, so we'll get to that. That'll be come under spoiler territory, I think. But that is the basic plot, and it's very, very detective heavy. This is like following the clues, following the crime scenes. So one of the things that I think people tend to feel goes by the wayside in Batman adaptations is that he's supposed to be the world's greatest detective. Here, I think it's probably lighter on that than I'm suggesting. It's a lot of it is he's investigating crime scenes, but a lot of it is kind of noticing a thing here or there, and he's adding things up. But it's not like combing things for clues, right?
And also, it doesn't draw the audience into the crime solving in the way that really great detective novels do. Or really great detective things where you're also meant to be figuring out along with the detective. And then when the detective does, and maybe you don't, you can still understand fully why the detective resolved it because you've had all the information.
It's not playing a game.
It's not playing with the audience in those ways. Yeah.
No. When we were seeing those trailers, I said you were going, "This is going to be fantastic," and my general thought was, "It looks like all the others lately."
Well, it doesn't, though.
The final result is that it doesn't. It is, for my estimation, richer, more atmospheric.
It's beautiful.
I do wish the tone would let up sometimes. I was saying before we went to see it, God, it's going to be 3 hours. And I think it pretty much justifies its runtime, but there is so little variation in tone. It is, I'm in the doldrums the whole way through. It's so bleak.
I didn't mind it. I loved it. I loved its bleakness, because I don't think it's just bleak. So, to say it's bleak, I mean, there's a lot of everything is created by the images, right? So I love the sexual heat, with Selina Kyle. I mean, I just loved her sexiness, and the way that it's deployed, right? And then, the way that Batman is drawn to her. And again, it's just little moments of gestures. I don't think they ever even kiss, right? But
they kiss twice.
Do they?
Yeah.
I forget.
And it's steamy.
It's steamy, yeah. I thought it was all suggested, actually. They get close, but they don't. But maybe that's just at the end, yeah.
She kisses him a couple of times.
And she kisses him, that's right. So I just thought it was beautiful. And I loved the way, I love the framing in the film. Yeah, because it is done almost like comic book panels. The rectangular frame of the screen is kind of broken up, into bits, and often action takes place in one of those bits, right? And you often get like a close up, but that's in this world of windows or frames and I also loved what it does with the focus. Yeah, that often, the backgrounds are out of focus, so it does feel like a dream, or, a world where you only see partially, or where then things come into focus. So, like when that trowel is thrown, it's just this vague, fuzzy object, and then when it lands, it's in focus. Right?
Yeah, it's doing more than just extreme shallow focus, although it is doing a lot of that. But it is also at times adding in effects. Well, they may be in-camera effects, I don't know. They could easily be in-camera or digital. But there are effects of the kind of edges of the frame kind of chromatically fraying and becoming blurred and kind of swirling in a way that focuses your attention on the centre or some part which is in clear focus. But that does suggest that kind of dreamy thing you're talking about. It did remind me of Joker, and I remember the thing about Joker was all the use of shallow focus and the kind of large format they were using for that felt so unmotivated to me. I thought it was doing it for its own sake to imply that it is art because it looks like this, because it looks expensive. This is much more motivated, and I know what you mean about the compositions, although the comic book thing to me, and this goes back to what you mentioned right at the start about the rain, it's much more to me about the use of colour. So you're absolutely right about the rain. In that car chase scene, you have this long, streaky white rain illuminated by the headlights that you can see, and it's comic book rain, exactly. But when it's a film in which there is basically one colour maximum on screen at any one point. It's like a single colour is used to give an entire scene cogency.
And I agree. And
that's a comic book technique.
Yeah, and it's not just that it's kind of the one colour dominates, but also that very few colours are used.
Yeah.
Like in those, pulpy comic books of the 50s and 60s, where, you'd get, like, red or, like, the film, basically, is amber, neon red, and a kind of a sea blue. Yeah.
There's a bit of blue and maybe
green.
Pink when you get a sunrise or sunset.
So, and the rest is black.
Yes.
And it's beautiful.
Shades of black.
It has, and actually, when you were talking about the Joker being arty, I don't think this tries to be that, because I think what the colour and the imagery suggest is the pulpy origins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the Batman. So it's pulpy in the sense that it is about, desire and dread and the past and loneliness and, kind of unfulfilled dreams and so on. So it has all of those. Yeah, and it's done in broad strokes. I mean, one of the things that I felt in this film, which is maybe a bit absurd and maybe I'm completely wrong about it, but I thought how delightful to see huge close-ups in the cinema again, right? Because, you feel that, like, there's so many close-ups in this film in a way that when you normally see them in a movie, I would say, oh, it's so badly filmed, it feels like television or something. There was something in the way that the close-ups were used here that were very cinematic.
Well,
right?
I think a lot of the time close-ups, a lot of it is just shot reverse shot in a lot of cinema, right? And it's cheap, and it's easy to do, and it's coverage, and it doesn't feel prepared, thought out, like the point of the scene. And here, exactly, composed. Yeah. That's what these are. You don't feel for a single moment that there's been coverage of a scene.
No, and actually the thing is, the cinematographer and the production designer, like, working in combination, have really worked on these close-ups. So it's not just the face, it's a face behind the screen or behind bars that creates this particular design, from the image, a graphic design from the image itself. Or, the head and the ears of the Batman are tilting in a particular way that again kind of creates this effect or this mood, right? It's really, I think, potent, and beautiful.
Let's think about the villain. I said we'd get to him, and so the spoiler territory is coming in right now, if it hasn't already. The villain is the Riddler, played by Paul Dano, as it turns out, and he's only revealed in the last third of the film.
Yes.
Up until then, he's been sending videos to Batman, sending notes, or kind of things that lead to videos. He's been sending videos to the news. It's reminiscent in part of the Joker's videos from the Dark Knights, sending in his handycam videos to the newspapers. Obviously, we're in a newer world now, so it's on effectively TikTok and live streaming and Twitch and all that kind of. That's how he's kind of interacting with the world he lives in. But it's still kind of, it's a phone video pointing at himself behind a mask, threatening Batman and threatening Gotham. It really reminded me of Saw, in fact, especially when he got to the second of his victims, who's in that kind of rat head trap. I mean, that's such a Saw thing. If he gets out, blah blah blah. And he's almost putting on the Jigsaw voice as well. There are elements of Seven in it. When you get into his apartment later on, he's got scrawlings and scribblings all over the place. You can, the influences I think are really on the sleeve. But ultimately, it kind of turns out that he's got elements of being an incel almost, certainly in his look.
Well, without a doubt,
and being a kind of shutaway. He's got elements of being like the Proud Boys, which I suppose the Proud Boys are also kind of incels too, in a way. Like the Proud Boys thing started off with being very proud of not masturbating, I think, and it was like you were part of a group, and then the group became domestic terrorists in America who tried to storm the Capitol. He definitely has elements of that, because when he's in prison at the end, he's still able to mobilise all these followers of his online, and you see all their comments. Rifles are good and all this. Like they want to take down these politicians and so on. They basically engage in a political assassination attack. Well, it's a not quite a coup, and they're not trying to take anything over, but they are definitely engaging in serious domestic terrorism and trying to murder a politician. I mean, I think it's a very clear analogue for January 6th.
Absolutely, I agree.
I did feel a bit cynical about that, though. It must be said. I did kind of feel how quickly you've commodified this into a superhero narrative.
Well, I mean, I didn't see it as a commodification. Again, I think artists take from the world they live in and try to speak to it.
There is a more generous way of looking at it. I absolutely agree.
And I think that's what they've done here.
It's an interesting interpretation of the character, and one that really makes a lot of sense, the way it's done. I think it also goes to what Batman is so often about underneath, which is it's quite a conservative thing, because it essentially takes someone who the system has failed. He's an orphan. We're all supposed to look up to the great Bruce Wayne, who was this kind of billionaire orphan. We can all make it, and of course we all couldn't because the system wasn't there for us. So he's someone who the system failed. He's someone who sees the kind of transparent fakeness of politics, at least how he sees it. You've got this election. Do you think it really matters, and so on. Some of these things are kind of really legitimate things for people to be upset about, wanting to change the system. But of course, what it does is it renders him a crazy villain, as it always does. Batman always comes down to a conservatism in that respect. Poison Ivy's an environmentalist.
I think not in this one. I think this is the most progressive.
Yeah?
Yes. Because, if you see like the Michael Keaton Batman, I mean, to be rich is to be wonderful and fun and have gadgets and have butlers and mansions and, Kim Basinger goes to the mansion. Ooh, wow. Like, in this place, it's lonely. Yeah, he's losing his money. His father's foundation is the cause of the corruption. His mom had mental health problems due to her father killing her mother. The father was basically involved in a crime, that spurned all of this. So, being rich here is the cause of crime.
Right.
Yeah, so basically the film chases this chain of events and finds the root source in the father and his money, right? So
that's interesting.
And also I think there's a very interesting doubling, which you often get in Batman films, where Paul Dano is an orphan, Selina Kyle is an orphan, class is an issue. Selina speaks of it as an issue. I can tell you're a rich kid, she tells him, right? And the Riddler says, well, you know what it's like to get a room. It's a room for 30, and one of the kids always dies because it's cold, right? Yeah, so not all orphans are the same. So I think the film is highlighting all of these things and highlighting the issue of class and privilege and whiteness.
Yeah.
Right. But I think you're still right. That, it's interesting that in spite of all of that, the villains are, the people who society has failed, nonetheless.
And as you say, you're right that Thomas Wayne, Batman's dad, was involved in this crime, killing this journalist because the journalists were going to spill secrets about the mother. But that's not what he wanted. You know, that's very clearly pointed out, right? Thomas Wayne was a good guy the whole time, and he made a mistake by getting the mafia involved to try and hush this down. And then the mafia killed the journalist, and that's not what he wanted. So, you know, still they're a good people. He's still good, right?
I know, but the film has a whole thing about fathers.
Well, yeah, right. Fathers and orphans, they're all over the shop in this.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I would argue, really, that the main villain was really Falcone.
Yes, I mean, I did think about
who plays him as the Godfather. Very quiet, very self-assured, very reassuring, even as he's strangling you, right? Like, I mean, it's kind of like a performance that I've never seen Turturro give before, because Turturro is really alive normally, Whereas this is almost like an Al Pacino in The Godfather 2 performance, right? It's very, very restrained, and he's incredibly effective, and he's kind of pretty ruthless, and he emanates that kind of ruthlessness, and control, really, and has no qualms about killing his own daughter.
No,
right. So
he does say something like, "I didn't want to have to do this," but I mean, he says it, and he's like,
you don't believe him, really.
No, he's all right to get on with it.
So I think there's something interesting there, and I think it's interesting to compare it to the other Batmans as well, right? Because I've not seen a Batman as critical of the rich and our foundations. And I mean, here, the Renewal Foundation is seen as a source of all evil, right? Like, as this fund that you can bribe people with and do things with, and it's not accountable to anybody. So, the charity of the rich is just seen as a power-mongering source of control that is unaccountable to the society at large, right?
Yeah, so this Renewal Fund is what Thomas Wayne kind of bequeathed to the city, is that right? And... but it was this, as you say, there was no oversight to this fund, and once Thomas Wayne was dead, the mob and everyone just started putting their hand into the pot. They could just take all this money. Yeah.
And if you see the world, because the film has like a kind of a gothic design, and also, that kind of, what do you call it when you have like 19th century things, but in slightly futuristic elements?
Steampunk?
Yeah, so it's not quite steampunk, but it has... a kind of a gothic steaminess, right? Of things that no longer quite work, So, the Batcave is a disused railway station that's kind of falling apart. The mansion is kind of, not so great either. The buildings, and then, of course, the whole system is kind of as crumbly, and as retrograde, as unfit for purpose. As the physical elements that you see kind of within the film. So I thought kind of all of that was of a piece, kind of they worked together. Yeah,
if you think about the recent Batmans, Nolan's and Christian Bale's and Affleck in the DCEU, those Batmans are, they have their bleaknesses and things, but Batman has enough money to have all the latest and best technology, things work, whereas this Batman... all this technology at least is ad hoc. It's kind of cobbled together. There's no real sense that he's got a lot of money behind it, although he obviously has some because he's got all this gear still. But it's
Alfred tells him if you don't look after it, you might end up with nothing. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the design of the Batmobile, it's cobbled together. It's kind of like an armoured sort of sports car that's been banged together and so on. Pretty much everything he's got is a bit like that. And although, mind you, I think his suit is still kind of fairly pristine, and it takes 5,000 gunshots at point blank range, so he's got some decent technology still.
Yes,
but it doesn't go into kind of like, remember the Christopher Nolan ones were going into detail about his technology division.
It was very Bond.
Yeah, none of that in this. It doesn't go into any detail as to where this stuff comes from. You just kind of, it's kind of environmental sort of storytelling in a way. You just pick it up, and the other thing is Batman himself is like so emo. I mean, the music on top of it has a kind of emo-ness as well. A lot of it, not the score, but the the whatever the just the, what's the word for it? When it's just soundtrack. There's just music that they've got from bands. I can't think of the word for it, but not the composed score.
Yes.
You know, a lot of that has a fairly emo-y feel from like the early 2000s.
I think to say Patterson's emo is not to do him justice. You know, because...
Well, I didn't feel that positive about it, so I'm using the word slightly pejoratively. It reminded me of emo Spider-Man from Spider-Man 3, and everyone knew not to take that seriously at the time, and everyone found it a joke. Here, it's like super serious.
I loved the seriousness of it. I mean, and I loved also the way the character's designed visually, because he really reminded me of the Cabinets of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, with the eyes, the cold black eyes. And
yeah, because he paints his eyes black.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not that he paints his eyes black, but the rubber mask leaves...
No, he paints it. He paints his eyes to stop his eyes. That's what they do.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, you'll see it in all the other Batmans too.
Okay.
but the difference here is that when he takes his mask off, which he does a lot, he does it, and you see the paint around his eyes that's left, and it makes it look kind of sunken in and depressive and big.
Yes.
Like the mask is taken off for that purpose, to show you that.
I think. I love that because you really feel the sense of an almost existential aloneness. He feels he's like really alone in the world, and which then is what makes that moment with Alfred so revealing, because you get the sense that he himself didn't realize how he felt about Alfred until that moment where he almost loses him. So you get the sense that he's really like kind of alone in the world, searching for meaning, trying to right a wrong that's not of his making, you know. I mean, and I think he expresses all that really, like, you know, incredibly well. And he's got that look. And I was actually thinking of him in what were those vampire films he was in? Twilight. You know, because there's something about Twilight vampire-ishness that connects very well with the Batman here.
Yeah.
So obviously that was lighter and it was teen and so on. Yeah, but there is there was always something vampiric about Batman. Yeah.
Well, he is a bat.
He's a bat. Yeah.
It's only just occurred to me, but you're right.
So I thought that kind of, that connected like really well. And there's a kind of an impassiveness and a kind of, an impassiveness.
Yeah.
That works really, really well for the role. And also that voice, that he takes on, this deep voice, which is almost like a voice of a radio mystery or something. Yeah, it's kind of...
Oh, yeah, it's totally playing on like that 30s, 40s noirish voiceover. It's not doing what, people start to take the piss out of in the Christopher Nolan films with the very, very huskily put on playful. Yeah. It's not doing that at all. There's a lot of speaking in whisper, though. Which I found a little bit... I mean, early on when he's talking to Gordon, and they're on the kind of trail, and they're just together looking at clues. But of course, they're just speaking in hushed whispers together. It's a little bit artificial, I guess. But I kind of went with it.
I mean, I think obviously it's kind of artificial, but in a good way.
But actually, artificial is not the right word. It's stylized.
It's very stylized. Yes, fabulously stylized, and I think he's my favorite Batman. Because there was something Boy Scouty about Michael Keaton, right? Like, as Bruce Wayne, right? Which I think, I love Michael Keaton, but it wasn't my idea of a Bruce Wayne. And, George Clooney and Val Kilmer, just forget about it, really. And I think with Christian Bale, he's a very good actor, but he's not transparent to me. So he's not warm, right? And so what I like about Patterson is that through his impassivity, you get a sense of what he's feeling.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think it's a really subtle thing. And I think it partly comes down to the script. It partly comes down to the other actors in the scene and how they respond to him. When you're talking about that impassivity, it's the way that other characters respond to his impassivity. And sometimes they do it kind of comically and say, like, you really don't say anything. But it's in the look he gives back to them when they're expressing whatever they're expressing. You feel what he's thinking. It's a really delicate, subtle thing, and it's kind of hard to kind of pass out how that's been achieved. But it's totally there. That's really hard to do.
I also want to mention that this is a very romantic film.
Yeah.
you know, because so you get the sense of real heat between Batman and Selina Kyle, and and yet there's this moment at the end, and he's trying to rescue her morally, and he does, right? She's always on top sexually, yeah, but he manages to rescue her morally in the sense of saying, if you do this, like your life won't be your own again.
If you kill someone.
Yeah, which, she says, I've got 9 lives. Yeah, she's way cooler about it than he is, but she doesn't do it in this film, at least.
Well, she does kick him off she does kick that guy, the corrupt cop, off the building, and they save him.
They save him.
So she almost does.
She almost does. But, but also there's a sense that he's misjudged her, right? That he thought she was just like a cheap drug dealer out on the make, and yeah. And then, of course, there's that wonderful moment at the end where, it's almost you get the sense they're meant for each other. They're really into each other, yes, but they go their different paths, yeah. And he looks in the rearview mirror longingly at this, wonderful woman that he's lost, or, that is leaving his life anyway. And
she disappears into the mist.
She disappears. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And that's the end of the film. That's the camera cuts back to him riding off, and that's the last shot of the film. Like it ends on her basically leaving, and then for them splitting.
It's on him losing her, but finding clearer purpose in life. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's a film that almost is saying, well, you can't have it all. Yeah, like kind of, So the sense of loss comes with a renewed sense of energy, and the two things are tied together: her disappearing in the mist and the motor revving up on the I thought it was wonderful. I
mean, it's a film that for all its very, very deep bleakness and depressiveness for so long, does give you this sense of hope, and which, thank God, quite frankly, because there are 2 sequels to come apparently.
I love it. I can't wait.
I mean, for all the positive things about it, I was thinking, it's really, really upsetting me.
Well,
just how depressing these people's lives are, knocking on 3 hours.
Yes, and I thought
that is big, and you've seen it twice now.
And I've seen it twice, and it deserves to be seen twice. It rewards a second viewing, the film. I mean, a lot of the visual elements, like, they didn't quite register the first time. I mean, they did. But actually not the subtleness of them didn't. I didn't notice, for example, that stuff about the way that the focus is used. And it's kind of a continuing device. Yeah, kind of, the use of shallow focus. It's my favorite Batman film.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. I do. I mean, I really would like Batman to lighten up again one day. I mean, basically, for the last 25 years, the only fun Batman there's been is the Lego one, and I don't think that really counts. Where did we go? Batman is so bleak.
Well, Batman was always bleak. I mean, and actually,
but Batman's
as someone who's read the comic book for most of my life, for all my life, really. The jokey Batman was never a good Batman, and he wasn't even that funny. And they were always like crap, You thought, oh fuck, no, I'm going. It's a funny one, ha ha, right? And you'd spend the money because really, you were a Batman fan, but actually they were always a disappointment, the funny ones.
Yeah.
So,
but
Batman is bleak. You don't like bleak?
You have too much of a bleak thing, I think.
Well, not in this one. I thought it was just, it was wonderful. Oof. It's like saying, you want a film noir screwball or something, right? Like, you don't get screwball if you're watching noir.
Well, I don't want a film noir screwball. I want a screwball.
Well, then go see something else, If you're going to see Batman, you're going to see something dark.
I know. He's just so grumpy.
I loved it. And I don't think it was grumpy. I don't think it was grumpy. I thought it was full of feeling, full of sex. Yeah. With things to say about the world that we live in, and what people are like. Offering some hope. Yes, which is, that is unusual, because actually in some of those other films that you're talking about, they're really very cynical at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And this one is not cynical. There is a good politician who is trying to get change, right, and is not part of that corrupt system. There are good cops even though all the city hall and the system might have been bought out, there are good cops, etc., etc. So I think,
Well, I think there may be a lesson learned there from the Zack Snyder ones as well, because when we talked about the Zack Snyder recut of Justice League that was 4 hours, we were talking about the kind of original vision for those films was, I think there was supposed to be 5, or maybe it was started with Batman vs Superman and Justice League was the third, and there were supposed to be 2 more after it, and the idea of those was to get to a real nadir of hopelessness, which I think was Batman vs Superman, and then to get on this upward trajectory for the following few movies, that you pull out of that and restore some hope to Gotham and Metropolis. But of course, the response to Justice League, the first one, was so negative that they got very, very scared and never saw it through. But then it may be that there's been a lesson learned from that, like you have to offer some hope at the start.
Well, I think also the times have changed, and I do think, these films speak to their times, really. So, after Trump, you need some hope. We know the system, because it used to be thought, oh, let's critique, right? And what is the critique? The system is corrupt. Well, thank you very much. We now already know that. So kind of, what is the way out of this darkness, right? We know the world is dark. To say that the world is dark in itself is no longer sufficient, right? So I think the film is very good about kind of, delivering kind of some hope, having a more rounded view of the world and of human nature, than we've been afforded so far in these types of films, while nonetheless kind of conveying a real social critique and the effects that it has on people, kind of people, the way that people feel, about, being oppressed or denied or, so on. So, and also about, desire as a kind of, something propulsive. And I liked very much, for example, that Selena Kyle, whose mother has been killed, by her father, who's kind of scrambling a living on the edges of the underworld, or not so in the midst of the underworld, nonetheless, is someone who stands up for her friend. If nobody, avenges her, it's like she'll have died for nothing. It's like her life didn't have meaning. And, so she kind of goes in this course of action for her friend, right? Not for money or, it's kind of, she begins by trying to find her passport, and then to kind of afford that life meaning. So I think there's depth here.
Mr. Rogers used to say that his mother told him that when you see something bad on the TV or in the news, look for the helpers. There's always someone helping.
Ah.
And that's what Batman does. Sorry for the Americans. The Americans bloody love Mr. Rogers. Can't get enough of him. Meanwhile, the Mr. Rogers film was awful.
I love Tom Hanks, though.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it good.
No, it doesn't. I also think, by the way, that you underestimate a bit the humor, because I thought there were bits that were quite humorous.
There were funny bits.
Yeah. And the thing with the doorman twins, and how he got into the club, I thought that was quite funny. Yeah,
there were bits that, there were jokes. I'm not underestimating that, but...
But it's not a comedy.
No.
All right.
No.
So let's wrap this up. I thought it was great. And I having seen it a second time, I think it not only rewards a second viewing, but actually I'm going to be tempted to watch it again. I think certainly when it comes out on DVD, I'm going to watch it again.
Yeah, it's better than I thought it would be. It probably is the best Batman for maybe ever, really. It's probably the most ambitious of any of them.
Yes.
And it essentially succeeds.
Yes.
All its ambition pays off.
I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was graphically kind of beautiful. And interesting, imaginative. I thought it was exciting, kind of what they were doing with color and with the, with compositions and, kind of the way that the story was told visually. I thought it was fascinating. And
I think it probably benefits from being so divorced from the DCEU, because there's something so, minimizing about having to fit things into that. I think it feels the same way with Marvel as well. Like the more Marvel's never done anything as standalone as this, but the more standalone Marvel films tend to be the better ones. The ones that are less connected to the
Yes.
the main characters, the main story that it's telling. This has a tonal feel that is different. It has an aesthetic that is completely different, and it's allowed to basically newly imagine Batman on screen, and it really, really works.
Yes. So on that note, highly recommend that you see it. Thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.